it's time that you knew there's someone there who's searching for you, and it's time that you believe he's gonna find you.
Why, hello everyone, and welcome to another exciting adventure with two guys fixing the world. My name is Mark Stallard, and I'm here with my very good friend Ryan Jans. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Mark. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. It's been such a long time since we last did one of these shows. It's nice to finally hear your voice again. So we're continuing on our minimum wage series. This is, I think, I forget now, 3, is it? Or I'm not sure how many we've done.
This is the third.
Okay. And we're going to talk about things, changes, and I say fixes and alternatives is what I've got written down. But things that we can change to make the system better. We're going to kind of shoot the breeze a little bit on things that can be done. And these aren't necessarily our ideas, but we'll definitely expand on them. And then we'll move then towards some possible legislation that could possibly help. So that's going to be coming up. But yeah, in the meantime, if you want to continue following us, we're on pretty much every podcast platform. We're on, you can catch us, pretty much all the details of all the shows are going to be on fixingtheworld.ca. Don't forget, like, subscribe, share, and all that other good stuff that you kids do these days.
So, and not just you kids, like we've said on any episode before, if you're a young kid and you're wanting to learn a little bit more about politics, you're welcome to come join us. If you're an old crusty salt like Mark and myself, you are welcome to come join us as well. There's a place for everyone here. So we don't want to just say just you kids. If you're listening, we're glad that you made us a part of your day.
Yep, and thank you so much. So there are, I guess, lots of things that we could that can be done to change the current status, whether or not you're a fan of raising the minimum wage, or you're a fan of the raise it to 15 or raise it higher, or even lower. There is fixes that we can do to the system to make things better for the people who are not making enough money to live on, and so we would need, I think. Really, we need a kind of a complete change to the system that we currently have. Right now, we've got a market system that's not really working particularly well, as we've kind of talked about in the previous episodes.
It didn't work well prior to the Industrial Revolution. It didn't work post-World War II, and it has not worked in the 20th and now into the 21st century. So we need to stop pretending that it works. It only benefits higher people up in the corporation, up that pecking order, so to speak, and it does not benefit us either in the middle or substantially lower to us who are in the middle, and even does not benefit even at all to anybody who's close to or at the bottom rung.
Yeah, right. So one of the things that the system would need to change so that companies would pay people based on the actual value of the work rather than the market value, and it's like that. That's the change to the system that really kind of needs to happen. It's the whole idea of the free market, as I think was the end of the last show, was so doctors make more because they're more highly skilled than other people and they're reasonably rare. There aren't as many, but there are a lot of people that can clean toilets. It's not particularly a high-skill job. It's a pleasant one, but there are probably thousands, if not millions, of people that could do it. Therefore, you can ask for less money because there's more competition for the job. On the other hand, if we had thousands and thousands of doctors and only a handful of people who wanted to clean the toilets, well, doctors, you can guarantee, in the free market, the doctor will be paid almost nothing, and the person cleaning the toilet will be making the big bucks. Now, whether that's a realistic that would ever happen, well, that's probably not.
But in a debate.
But in a market system, that would happen. So
but that's the analogous. And even if you didn't want to go so far as the toilet, doctors don't clean their own equipment. They have other people who clean equipment. There are lots of healthcare aides out there who make a living changing bed sheets and emptying bed pans, sterilizing equipment, and they are just as important, because if they don't do their job properly, someone can get an infection, someone could get really sick, or they could even die. If the surgeon doesn't do his job properly, people can die. It's the same consequences, but it's just a different tier. Healthcare aides get paid a huge difference between a doctor, but they're not as they are just as much. And even though there are way more healthcare aides than there are doctors per capita, so
yeah, and I said I mean the whole thing, doesn't really need to change. The so one of the things that would need to be done is to kind of reduce the power of corporations and businesses. I mean, it's not just the big corporations. It is them, but not just them. But that when workers end up with no power, which allows the businesses to kind of dictate the standards of the standards of work, how much you're going to be paid, what you're going to do. Because there are so many people looking for work and so relatively few jobs, that the employees just have to suck it up. They can't really argue, they can't really fight back, and they just have to put up with it. Because if you don't, there's always someone that is going to that they can find to take your place. Now, now I think we've all probably known someone. I've experienced this a couple of times. Is arguing with someone. Well, not my anecdote is going to be what you've experienced, not the argument. But is that if you had an argument with someone that was, I get, if I want to leave the job, I get to put two weeks notice in. Therefore, the company gets to put 2 weeks, give me 2 weeks notice that they're firing me. It's the same. No, it is. It is the same. It is equal. 2 weeks equals 2 weeks, but it's not equitable. What I mean by that is that with a giving me 2 weeks notice, it could take me, and it has. I've been in a position where it's taken me almost 11 months to find another full-time job. And now we're dipping into savings, pensions disappeared now, and so on. But a company, you give your 2 weeks notice in before the end of your first week of when you're working your first week of notice, guaranteed they can have 3, 4, 5, 6 people in interviews by the end of that week. They can have the interviews done already, and by the end of your second week, they can have your replacement and still have time for you to train them for a few days. So this is not equitable even slightly. So we've got to reduce that. So we need to reduce that. And we'll talk about what would take for that to happen. A little bit towards the end there.
But we also have to talk about things like legislation. We have to legislate out the idea that part-time jobs carry the same weight as full-time jobs as an economic prospect. So when they say that, hey, we've added 10,000 jobs because of our leadership, well, if 7,000 of them are part-time jobs, that's not really an ad, especially if some of those part-time jobs are for 1/3 of a week out of a 40-hour work week. If it's only 27 hours a week or less, that's not a win for anybody, regardless of what the wage is. If you're well above minimum wage but only making 20 hours a week, you might as well be working full-time at a lower wage.
Yeah, actually, and that's actually a good point. We're going to kind of go on and talk. We actually do have a kind of a solution to that. But and I like it, and we're going to talk about it a bit more now. But it's that the legalized or the legalese, the political ease, I guess, political language is that when we talk about unemployment numbers. Now, unemployment numbers are a load of bollocks, if excuse the expression. It's an English expression. It's a load of bollocks.
I don't think there's a lot of kids watching this show.
Yes, well, probably the English kids will giggle. Everyone else will go, what did he say? He sounds English.
That's because I watch a lot of British TV.
Yeah, but it's the whole idea that is that we're talking about there's only 5% unemployment. And they're all saying, but the unemployment's only 5% or whatever it is, or 2%, but that's not really true, right? That is 5% of the population are actively looking for work. That doesn't include people whose benefits have run out. It doesn't include people that have stopped looking. And it doesn't include the infirm or the elderly or people that cannot work for whatever reason. And so it's only those people that are actively looking for work that are counted. And that's ridiculous. There are lots of people that aren't looking because they've just given up because there just aren't the jobs there. And those absolutely should be counted and are not. So one of the things that would have to change is we've got to change that. We've got to outlaw that kind of bull. Well, careful, family show. That kind of nonsense, we'll say.
Yeah,
it's just
that kind of rubbish. Yeah,
yeah.
That kind of whatever you want to call it, insert acronym here. Expletive deleted here.
Yes,
there you go.
Exactly.
You can,
bleep.
So the big thing for me is always that, you know, if you're adding thousands of jobs, or in the sake of a U.S. when President Obama was there, he was saying, "Oh yes, we've added like 30,000 jobs to our economy." Well, if a third of those are part time, then that could be okay. But if 2/3 or more are part time, that's not really much of an add. You're definitely choking off, and it does come down to this definition of what we can get away with. And I think the real, and this is where you get really crafty, and this is, you got to be watching businesses, and this is the kind of thing that we really need to legislate against. If they say we don't want minimum wage jobs, that strictly refers to, and what most businesses would understand is, they don't want jobs that are at the minimum wage for the hourly rate.
Right.
They don't care that if you salaried out $11.65 here in Manitoba to whatever that is, that's probably like $27,000 a year. They're not thinking of that in a salary. They're thinking of that in terms of, I don't want to see $11.65 on my paycheck. I'm going to pay you $15 an hour, but I'm only going to give you enough hours to make the equivalent of $27,000 a year.
Right.
Which is really only about 33 to 37 hours a week. That's not full time. And when you're not full time, they can take advantage of other labor laws where they don't have to pay you pension. They don't have to pay you don't get stats. So you may have to end up working a stat. You don't get certain opportunities for overtime. So that's not a win. That's not a win for us. That's not a win for Manitoba or Canada as a whole. That only is a win to the business. So we need to legislate this idea of one-sided businesses. The win only for the business. Everybody has to win.
Yeah.
Right. So if you want to pay me, if you only want me for 37 hours a week, you still have to pay me benefits. You still have to pay me all that, because you're paying me a higher wage. So that all has to be in proportion, and it's not in proportion if we look at it the way it is now.
Yeah, and it's even worse in places like the US, where they rely on their business, on the company that they work for healthcare. It's even worse there.
Right.
And where we know that our current provincial government is trying their hardest to break our healthcare. That's only a matter of time before that disappears if we don't act. But that's beside the point. That's something off topic. Anyhow,
that's another show. That's another topic for another show, which we should probably talk about sooner than later.
Indeed. And of course,
because I don't think all of us can survive palest care if it keeps up the way it's going. So,
well, palest not care.
Yeah, there you go.
So what we need. What kicked off this show was a bit of history on minimum wage. Minimum wage came with lots of benefits. Days off, vacation time, health and safety. Not sending children up chimneys. Rules and regulations that kept workers safe. Hours as well. Don't forget the 8-hour day is relatively new as well. That's around about the same time that people would be working until they couldn't keep awake. And so
12 hours was not an uncommon for a 12-year-old to be working. 12 hours.
Yeah, and so
not schooling. 12 hours of working in a factory.
And so
coal.
So that came about because the workers banded together. They unified, became unions, and the labor movement was invigorated. They worked together, and they were able to actually use tactics like strikes or work to rule, and campaigning and whatever else, not campaigning, protesting, and we're able to change the minds of politicians to make those changes. And let's not forget that some of the protests happening in the US, that's places like Amazon have actually raised minimum wage because they're scared that it'll be legislated. So some of the movements actually increase some of their pay, if only superficially.
Mhm.
So we kind of need that as well. We need people to be working together, not as individuals, but together as a group that have the same interest, and we do.
Yeah, and yes, and so we did touch. You did touch on unions there, and unions are not a bad thing. I think there's been too much rhetoric about unions, saying that they only protect lazy workers, that all your money go to you're going to pay extra on top of that. Oh, well, you're going to find everyone's going to find a way to take your money one way or another. You might as well give it to someone who's actually going to try to help you out. And I give this an example here, and this is for my own workplace. I won't mention my workplace, but I will commend. I work very closely. I work in a subset of the electrical trade, and I work with a lot of union shops. And our biggest union shop is IBEW, the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, local 2085 here in Manitoba. Man, they are some of the most outstanding and really dedicated and hardworking electricians that I've worked with. I do occasionally get I get the occasional guy who's not quite up to snuff or wants to drag his feet a little bit, but I get that just as much in the public sector. I work with some electricians in the public sector that work for public corporations, and man, they just drag their feet because they want to get their hours. They want to get their 8 hours a day. They have no intention of working fast. They want to get their time in, and that's it. So you can see it on both sides of the spectrum. So unions aren't necessarily a bad thing. Can unions go bad? Absolutely. They can start being self-interested instead of interested looking out for the workers. But for my experience with working directly with unions is their guys are just as dedicated and hardworking as any other electrician that I've worked with.
Yeah, we were since the 1960s, the US, and then bleeding into Canada and the UK and the rest of Europe, just demonizing unions. Particularly coming out of the McCarthy era, where anything on the left and anything that smelled of socialism was evil and disgusting and nasty. And so, yeah, I mean, unions have had a bad rap. But if we want to talk about corruption, yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
sure there have been corruption. But let's talk about corporations. I mean, they are set up for a whole load of people to be working their asses off so that a handful of people at the top can take all the money. How is that not a form of corruption? Where we do the work, the workers do the work, and someone at the top in some kind of legal pyramid scheme get to keep all the profits. And then as soon as it becomes profitable, they can make more money by not having you around, you're gone and you've lost your livelihood. There's a level of corruption there. That's it may not necessarily be legal corruption, but there's certainly some ethical issues there. Yeah,
and you know what? It was interesting is I do work for a multinational corporation, which will remain nameless because I have an agreement about what and how we share things about our workplace. I will not divulge where I work because this actually is.
And you want to keep your job. You need your job, just like the rest of us.
Yes, exactly. But this is something that even was acknowledged by lots of people in our company. At one point, our entire division was up for sale. So to make it more appealing to a potential buyer, they eliminated the warehouse position at our company. Literally had the branch manager walk up to the guy, no warning, hand us you're done. We've eliminated your position. We don't have another position for you. You've been with us for about somewhere between 6 to 10 years. Hand us your security tags. We'll escort you out. That was 2 weeks before Christmas. That was awful. And a lot of us were sitting there thinking, well, if they can do that to him, maybe I better start dusting off my resume. maybe we better start looking because that was, and all that was just to save a line on the balance sheet so that we could look more attractive. Never mind what it's done in the back and how much it's tied up other resources by losing that person. Right? So it's just, it doesn't help when corporations can just arbitrarily do that. And that decision was made by somebody who is in our head office of the head office of the head office, which is in the UK. So somebody on the other side of the world made a business decision to make us look more profitable. So we all had to lose it. Just so that the price would be a little more attractive and they could make a little more money on the sale.
Yeah.
That's brutal. That kind of stuff that just can't happen.
Yeah. And there's another thing that is massive in keeping the pay low for people is it's the march towards a monopoly, or at least a virtual monopoly, where in many fields we have maybe 2, 3, 4 big massive international companies fighting. Particularly we think of the multimedia companies, cell phones, communications. Go to them all and try and find a cell phone plan that's competitive. No, they're all exactly the same, and it's that same idea.
Like dollars difference. That's about it.
I mean, it's like you got to. It's like the free market is like you got to. Thousands and thousands of dogs all fighting each other, and in the end, you've got 5 really big and butch and vicious dogs all staring at each other with a standoff. But it never really gets down to one. But they're all looking at each other, seeing what each other does, looking over each other's shoulders, and just seeing they're getting away with that, so we'll raise our price up a little bit as well. To end the analogy already, and so you end up with fewer employers, which means then that you got fewer options of where you can work, and you get often. I mean, in that way, you'll get companies that work together to keep the price down, to keep the wages down. Not necessarily, not necessarily hand in hand, but like I said, looking over each other's shoulders, seeing what they can get away with, and of course they have the same goal, right? That's hire people for as little money as
make the
possible.
Most money, right?
Yeah, it's just so that they can pretty much take the fruits of their labor and give it to someone else.
Yeah, exactly. So that was a bit of a tangent there. We'll just sort of bring it back in. We were looking at different fixes and wages for minimum wage. One was to make sure there's de facto public support for low-wage corporations. That was sort of covered in our not making a part-time job-based economy and paying you more, but the same amount.
Actually, that point would be so for public support. So when you have governments as well. I mean, there's us as the public allowing them to get away with it, but when you have governments and local governments, councils or whatever, who are hiring these companies, but only hiring the people that are paying their people, or only hiring the companies that are paying their people decent pay, right?
That's right.
Yeah, and
so there's legislation we can actually talk to your MPs, talk to your MLAs, say we don't want to stand for that. That's the kind of thing that probably would get laughed at given our current political climate in Manitoba, but you never know. And you know what, enough people say we're not interested in that. Well, you don't really have a choice. You won't be in power for very long, either by force or by you'll be out by next election. So you do have to listen to your people, whether or not you agree with them or not. You do have to listen to them.
Yeah.
One of the things that a point that we've sort of skated around here is, of all things, many economists actually favor the idea of a higher minimum wage. They just ultimately think that there's more. We had talked about the benefits in our last episode. You can go check that out at fixingtheworld.ca. Check that episode out. And there's some great links and resources to show up some of the pros and cons. Most economists actually support the pro minimum wage going up. It just ultimately is better. There's less ways to pragmatically argue some of the facts. Now, we picked apart a few on the pro side because no argument is 100%. But for the most part, 2 points were sort of picked apart on the pro side, whereas lots more we picked apart, and that's just us as a couple of guys pragmatically arguing them out. So
Yeah, for sure. So one of the things that one of the areas that can help with minimum wage too is make people allow people let people own the business that they're working in. Co-ownerships. We're talking about worker co-ops. True economic democracy, which will come from that. So you're an owner. You will, in a workers' co-op, you're not, and if you decide to robotize something, you're not going to put yourself out of work, and so on, right? You're not going to decide, okay, well, we're going to sell this, the company that we're working in, to a multinational, and they can ship the jobs to another country. You're not going to do that. There's so many, then you're going to be looking after your employees, because as an owner, you will be your own boss in some respects, and I think that and I think we'll be looking into worker co-ops and those other alternatives in future shows. We have to do a bit more research on those though before we go too far. And of course, we want to encourage entrepreneurs as well. So the self-employed. What I mean by that is that self-employed that have very few, if any, employees, usually working for themselves as well. So encouraging people to become the business leaders of their own, running their own business. So you're not relying on other people, and then of course at the same time you're not putting yourself in a position where they're going to take what you earn and only give you a little bit back.
Agreed. And we are getting a little bit short on the time that we've sort of set for ourselves here, but we just touched on it a little bit with that last comment about automation and robotization. These are things that can add value to a worker and should actually increase the minimum wage, as long as that can't talk. As long as that automation. Good job, Ryan. You're not necessarily paid to talk right now, but that's what we're doing this for. Talk. That automate.
Okay, we'll cut that out in post. All right.
All right, yeah, sure. No, you can go ahead. See, it's not a show unless someone puts their foot in their mouth. Right? I'm reading my shoe right now. Anyways, that process should not be at the expense of the worker. If it means that you can actually remove the worker from a menial task and can do it in a much more efficient way and save money, so that savings can be passed on to the worker, and you can redesignate them to a different area and reorientate what they're actually going to do, then that actually brings a tremendous amount of value to your business and adds tremendous amount of value to that employee and what they can contribute to that business. And that is a win-win. But currently, we're not seeing that. We're seeing automated tellers and automated checkouts and automated this and that, so that they can eliminate the workers.
Right. Yep.
And that is a much bigger topic than what we can give credence to in the next
for sure
4 minutes.
And we do have a note actually to do robotization, and we're going to look into that a bit more. And at some point in the future, we'll do that one for sure. It's something that interests both of us, actually, I think.
Yeah, not within the sci-fi thing and the iRobot and lots of different justice for robots. But again, that will come up. And how would you define worker rights if you have a fully automated workforce? Hey, I said it, automated. Yes.
Well, okay, there you go. You can do it.
Exactly. But again, as I said, that is much more broader than we have for the little time remaining. So, Mark, I'll give you last thoughts, and then
let's just we'll just quickly skip over, or not skip over, but go through the couple of points of legislation that could help fix it as well. The obvious being, of course, actually legislating a decently high minimum wage. So it's not just scrapes you above the poverty line, but takes you way beyond that. So that's something. Tax breaks for the poor. I mean, wow. What an idea! Maybe and maybe looking at more of a progressive tax for the uber rich. Don't want to be punishing people for making money, but the uber rich did not earn that money. You can be sure on that other people earned it for them, and they kept it. And we maybe even eliminating all taxes other than that which companies and corporations make, the ones that quote unquote make money, that make a profit, because as individuals we don't make a profits. So that would be something we could look at as well. Maybe even running a jobs program so we could get full employment. Guaranteed, if we have full employment, 100% employment. None of this 5% unemployment garbage. But actually, everybody that wants to work and is able to work can work. That would mean then that the unemployed, the people that are looking for work, would be so much a smaller part of the market that the businesses will actually go out of the way to offer them more to attract them. Literally, that would, in order to use the free markets to your advantage, full employment. That's the way to bring them to, for the people that favor a free market. That's the true free market solution, is full employment. Anyhow, we can probably look at all of these points that we talked about today in other shows, in other ways, and expand them on a bit more. But I think
that's right. And so I think we'll cut it off there and we'll bring it into land. So anyone, if you're listening, thank you so much for joining us this week. You can catch up with Mark and I anytime at fixingtheworld.ca. All our podcasts are up there, as well as on your favorite podcast app. We are on all of them, including YouTube, and we also do have another show. If you enjoy listening to Mark and I go on, we are also musicians, as we've mentioned before. This is called The Invisible Man. It can be found at theinvisibleman.ca or at It's All in the Mind Band on Facebook, and we have regular video shows that are at least twice a month with a good friend of ours, Colorado Phil, from the Colorado Phil Show, on Facebook. And so if you want to put a face to the voice, come check us out there.
Yep, it'd be great to see you.
This has been another show for Two Guys Fixing the World with my good friend Mark Stollard and myself, Ryan Jans. Thank you for making us a part of your day. Have a good one.
Thank you very much, everyone. Goodbye.
He's gonna find you